My name is Arlette. I'm 29 years old. And even now, the smell of roasted turkey can make my jaw tighten. Because that was the night my brother stood up at Thanksgiving and announced that our parents had secretly handed him the company I had built, and according to him, I would be getting nothing. We were sitting around my parents' long oak dining table, the same one where I had spent countless nights balancing invoices and laptops while everyone else watched football in the living room. The candles flickered softly, almost like they knew something terrible was about to happen. My brother cleared his throat with the kind of confidence he always practiced. Dressed in his usual tailored suit, he lifted his glass and spoke loudly enough to freeze every conversation in the room. "Before we eat," he said, "I want to thank Mom and Dad for believing in me and officially handing me the company." Then he smiled, sharp and deliberate, "And Arlette won't be involved anymore." A rush of heat burned behind my eyes, not because it shocked me. Betrayal has its own scent, cold, metallic, and strangely familiar. What hurt most was the timing. It was calculated, almost surgical, meant to humiliate. My parents didn't even look at me. Not when he said I was getting nothing, as if the word itself had already been decided long before this dinner. But the truth was simple. I built that company from a borrowed desk in a freezing studio apartment, nights fueled by cheap coffee and stubborn determination. Meanwhile, my brother spent those same years finding himself, mostly using my money to do it. And now he stood there like the hero of a story he had never written. My mind flashed back to the first client I convinced to take a chance on me. I had promised a turnaround I barely knew how to deliver. I remembered negotiating contracts while hiding my shaking hands under the table. The weeks when payroll came first and my own paycheck came last, because I couldn't bear to disappoint my team. All of it rushed back at once. Across the table, my mother calmly dabbed her lips with a napkin, while my father stared down at the wood grain like it might somehow absolve him. My brother continued talking, building his version of the story. He said our parents wanted stability, a real leader, someone capable of taking the company to the next level. The air in the room grew thinner. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Conversations died. Family dinners have a strange way of turning into courtrooms, with no jury and no defense. My aunt glanced nervously at me. My cousin cleared his throat. The silence almost begged me to shrink back into the role they expected, to stay quiet, to swallow it. Instead, I lifted my glass and took a slow sip of wine. The cool rim touched my lips, and in that moment, I tasted something else too. Courage I had been storing for years. Because right then, the words that would later define that moment formed clearly in my mind. My brother had stood up at Thanksgiving and claimed the company I built, while announcing I would receive nothing. So I took another sip, turned toward my father, and calmly asked, "Should I tell them now, or do you want to?" The question hit the room like a dropped plate. For the first time all evening, my father finally looked at me. Panic flickered across his face, the look of someone who suddenly realizes a locked drawer has just been opened. He mumbled something about timing, about family, about gratitude. But it was too late. The room had shifted. People were looking at me now. And suddenly, the years of staying quiet started peeling away. I thought about the emails I had saved, the documents I insisted on signing, even when my parents said paperwork wasn't necessary. The clauses I added late at night because I trusted contracts more than promises. I remembered how my brother's name had been missing from every important document, and how strangely it began appearing later when it suited them. Their entire plan depended on one thing: my silence. But I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Calmness can be louder than anger. The pause stretched long enough for the turkey to cool. Then I asked again, gently, "So, should I tell them now, or do you want to?" My brother's confident smile began to fade. The room leaned forward. And in that breathless moment, I realized something powerful. Once the truth is invited into a room, it rarely asks permission to stay. My father tried laughing it off, but the sound cracked halfway through. My brother shifted awkwardly in his chair, like a man realizing the ground beneath him might collapse. I placed my glass on the table and told everyone there were things they deserved to hear, because this wasn't just about feelings. It was about facts. I explained how the company hadn't been a family project like they like to claim. I had started it alone at 23, with a loan I personally paid back. Every early contract listed me as founder and sole owner. My parents only joined later, first offering advice, then slowly turning that advice into pressure. And my brother's sudden rise to leadership, that had happened quietly behind my back while I was negotiating our biggest expansion. I watched expressions around the table changed as details replaced assumptions. Relatives leaned forward asking questions my brother clearly couldn't answer. My mother tried to interrupt, saying this wasn't the place for such conversations, that Thanksgiving should be about unity. But I calmly reminded her that they were the ones who chose this moment when they announced I was getting nothing. Togetherness built on lies, I said, is just another form of control. My brother snapped that I was exaggerating, that the company needed stronger leadership, and he was simply stepping up. That's when I slid the folder across the table toward my father. "Either you explain the signatures," I said, "or I will." Inside were copies of incorporation papers, equity agreements, and emails confirming my sole ownership. As my father flipped through them, his shoulders slowly sank. Across the table, my brother's confidence turned into anger. Someone gasped when they realized he had been named interim CEO without any legal authority. Another relative whispered, "This looks bad." I didn't enjoy their discomfort, but I also didn't soften the truth. I told them I had discovered the attempted transfer weeks earlier and had already spoken with legal counsel. I had waited until Thanksgiving because I hoped they might choose honesty first, but since they hadn't, I was finished protecting their feelings at the expense of my future. Voices erupted across the table. My brother argued he had been promised everything since childhood. My parents insisted they were just trying to keep the peace. But I repeated one simple truth. Peace without fairness is just silence forced on someone else. Finally, my uncle stood up and demanded everyone calm down. Facts mattered more than pride. And in that moment, my father finally admitted what he had been avoiding all evening. Legally, the company was mine. Any attempt to give it away would fail. They had simply hoped pressure would make me surrender. Hearing it spoken out loud felt like a door closing behind me. Final, liberating. I stood up, thanked everyone for listening, and told them the rest could be handled through lawyers, not over Thanksgiving leftovers. Then I walked out into the cold night air, with my coat half buttoned, my heart racing, but my spine straight. For the first time in years, I felt lighter. The weeks afterward were messy, angry messages, reluctant apologies, and eventually silence. But the result was clear. My brother lost the inheritance he imagined. My parents lost the leverage they depended on, and I gained something far more valuable than an apology. Clarity. The company continued forward under leadership chosen for ability, not bloodline. And I learned something important. Family loyalty does not mean accepting betrayal as tradition. Now, when people ask whether I regret speaking up that night, I think about the candles on the table, the turkey growing cold, and the calm moment when I asked, Should I tell them now, or do you want to? And I smile, because that single question changed everything. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been underestimated, pushed aside, or told you were worth nothing after giving everything, make sure you subscribe. This channel shares powerful, real stories about standing up for yourself, reclaiming your value, and letting the truth finally take its rightful seat at the table.